Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to Bottomless Coffee with Jerome. Okay, so today we're going to talk about censoring of queer media and the oppression of LGBTQ plus culture. And as luck would have it, our very first episode was a celebration of the book, Our Gay History in 50 States. It's a book of queer history that has been targeted by anti-LGBTQ plus activists. But our guest is also the founding attorney of Zaylore Stout and Associates. So we are going to get the perspective of the author and the attorney on this one. Here we go. Welcome back, Zaylore. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Now, I will say, as I was going through the welcome, I was like, oh, this is dark stuff. This is... So I'm glad you're in good spirits. Things are going well, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
But can we get a quick recap of this wonderful book? Let me hold it up to the camera. Our Gay History in 50 States.
Yes, so the book highlights significant people, places, and queer facts on a state-by-state basis. So in writing the book, it was important for me for folks to be able to find and be able to connect with their local history, because that's always the one that's most important to folks, and then venture out to other states where it could be states that they plan on visiting, or states that they may be going to college, or states where they have family members, or just interested in history in random states that they've never been to. And so one of the things I loved about the book as well is that I hired an army of queer youth.
That's right.
To help me do the research for the book. So it was really this community effort from that perspective. And on our website, we have free curriculum that educators and parents can download. Of course, they're age appropriate, have experts that help in regards to ensuring that it meets the Common Core requirements. But yeah.
And I remember as I was going through the book, it actually made me more interested in history. I was like, oh, history is not that boring when you've got a part in it, you know?
True. And I mean, it was intentionally set up to be a history book, but then a coffee table book, right?
Yeah.
So you want it to be engaging, you want it to draw people in. Everybody has a powerful device in their hand of their smartphone. So if they want to dig into the details of any of the entries, they can. But this is just to give them a flavor for all the stuff that's out there that they may have missed.
And since we've had that first conversation on the podcast, I had a really great conversation with someone about preserving queer history and queer spaces in particular. And I was like, oh, I've got the perfect book for you to flip through to find some references on where queer history has been made. But it seems that some people are not as excited about this book as I was. And it's very strange because as we describe it, you can get the book for yourself. We're not hiding the ball here. It's right there in the title.
Right.
There's nothing, to me,
Right.
There's nothing really inflammatory about it. And I think it says something when people are targeting books of gay history.
Right.
And it says it loud and clear.
Well, and a lot of the books that are currently being targeted aren't just referencing gay history, but just the gay experience as well, right? And the part that's so interesting and so weird in regards to this time in our country's history is I had been doing presentations at the National Gay and Lesbian
Is it Chamber of
Law
Commerce?
Conference,
Okay.
the legal conference, the Lavender Law Conference,
Yes.
right? I had presented 2 years in a row in regards to the history as it relates to banning books and things of that nature, and that we were getting away from that, and that there were so many states that were actually requiring the teaching of LGBT history in schools.
Yes.
Right? So each time that there was a state that was being challenged as it relates to some of these old antiquated laws, which really go back to the 1980s and the fear surrounding the HIV/AIDS crisis. And there were only a few states left. And then I was like, oh, I guess I shouldn't be presenting on this topic anymore because it's old. And then the very next year, boom, Florida jumps in and it's like, stop woke act, and don't say gay. And then it just flourished around the country again. So it's strange time where, we were making so much effort in regards to things. And then, some people take, have problems in regards to the accurate sharing of history with others. And the danger that they feel as it relates to that. Same thing with Black history.
Yep.
The one thing that was interesting to me and was just so disappointing, in Florida, that they had put forward Rosa Parks' story and saying that they wanted to change it so that it was a woman that just didn't want to give up her seat on the bus.
Oh.
Not reference that she was a black woman, not reference that the laws on the books
We're specific
required
to
black
women,
folks
to
to sit in the
black people.
back,
Yep.
right? And that was the act of civil disobedience. But no, they didn't want to reference any of that. It was just, she was just a woman that was tired and didn't want to get up. And that's the history that they want to put forward as accurate and true, and that's not the case.
It's revisionist.
It's revisionist.
Yes.
1000%.
Okay, so we've got a little bit, we've got different strategies here. You've got revisionism,
Yes.
and you've got outright banning, right? They weren't
True.
saying, we're not going to tell the story of Rosa Parks
True.
at all. We're just going to edit out the part about her being black.
Right.
Whereas in our gay history, it's not like, well, okay, we're going to change all of these facts and just remove the part about the being queer. We're just going to take it off the
remove
off
the fact
shelf.
that we even existed anyway.
Right.
Right. And I didn't necessarily think when I was writing the book that highlighting and uplifting the story of every state would be something that's controversial. But now, even having this discussion with you and thinking about it, if this was a book that was written and focused on New York or Illinois or, I would have said Florida before because there's a lot of queer history in Florida. That could be a whole book in regards to the research that we did on that. There would be less pushback than me uplifting the stories as it relates to queer history in North and South Dakota, Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, right? And so it's interesting that I guess perhaps that's what helped to make me a target as it relates to this book. The fact that I'm uplifting the stories locally for folks to be able to know that there have been significant headways and changes in historically significant things that have happened in each and every state.
You, on some level, feel like you personally are being targeted, as well as our history? Does it feel very personal for you?
There have been threats in regards to stuff.
Oh, this is the second time you come on here. They're always threatening you.
Child. Yes. And, the main culprit, I guess I would say, as it relates to that. I mean, it's a lot of this Trumpy kind of stuff. So it's multifaceted. And it really came about during the aftermath of the, George Floyd murder and trial and all that kind of stuff that was happening is really when things kind of reared its ugly head and still progressing through today.
So in the aftermath of the George Floyd uprising and trial, people, which was, I would group that in like civil rights, but particularly like the Black civil rights movement. People came out after you with regard to the book.
Well, came out to me.
You do a lot of stuff.
I want to make. Well, just me being outspoken in regards to the Black experience, how this relates to the Black experience.
Yes.
Right, and then me being one of the few people that lived through the LA riots and the ones in Minneapolis, right? Because there's not a lot of Californians moving out to Minnesota, especially in the Gen X generation. So I think it was just my voice being elevated in regards to speaking on these issues at the time. And then folks realizing that there's other aspects to my identity. And they're like, yeah, we don't like you because you're Black. And we don't like this other aspect of you that you're gay too. And you're over there trying to get this information about gay history, right? Thinking that if you don't tell folks, and you don't reference any gay experience, then their kids aren't going to be gay. Or their kids aren't going to be trans.
Sure.
Right? And we know that that's not the case. That's not true.
It's interesting. I have written grant applications. A lot of them are identity focused, and I'm like, well, we gotta identify that I've got two identities that I live with simultaneously.
Correct.
And it's because I grew up in Georgia, I can recognize the type of oppression, the racist oppression. That they're like, well, he's saying all these things, and sure, he's Black, and we're not racist. But he's gay, so. So we'll silence him for that reason. Right. I'm tracking with you because I have lived that experience before, and it's infuriating.
You're right.
But I think you're absolutely right to feel personally targeted, for sure. But that's just deeply frustrating because you do so much great work for the community.
Here's the thing, and how I have to look at it is that our ancestors went through a whole lot more.
Okay.
Right.
That's
and
true.
so I think that's part of how I, continue to fight and push through, is because, when we were growing up, I didn't there weren't any out folks.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
weren't any out couples
Yeah.
that were living their lives and having families and kids and buying houses and getting married. That wasn't something that was present. And so I feel the obligation to be able to live my authentic life, knowing that the neighborhood kid across the street that may be queer and doesn't know anybody sees the rainbow flag in our yard and knows that, and sees us walking our dog and living our lives and interacting with our neighbors and stuff, and see that it can possibly not be a big deal or an issue, just depending on where you are at in society and how society progresses in regard to the issue of inclusion.
I mean, that's so real. And another real fact is like, yeah, just living your life. It's not hard. You know, it's I think it was Trixie Mattel. That was like, it's other people that are making our lives hard.
True.
Like I was 98% of the time I am on sweatpants hanging out with my husband watching TV.
Right? Which I have to, yes, your closet's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Redid the closet. You got to follow the blog.
There is a blog on JeromeTevans.com. My husband did help us get new closets. He also was the reason we needed new closets.
Oh, well, I would be the guilty one in our house. I'm the one that has all the clothes.
Well, you look great, so I understand
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, but I don't know if you're comfortable naming names, but there are people responsible for coming at our community, for trying to ban your book. But when I was wondering about who it was that's responsible, I was like, well, it's coming from so many people, so many organizations. It's definitely organized.
Of course.
And so from your perspective, as someone who could also like identify that, like what have you found, and who are you able to identify?
Well, I mean, as you indicated, I mean, there's just so many now, and I
Yeah.
think there's this whole, shotgun approach to it, where it's like if you attack a lot of people in a lot of different places all at the same time, it's hard to be able to identify where to focus your efforts.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's been the approach of the conservative movement as it relates to this issue. So it's like, there's, and I think we'll probably reference this as well as we discuss, but, there's the corporate angle and the corporate giving angle.
Yeah.
There's attacking schools and attacking school boards, which I used to go to school board meetings all the time when we're trying to get gender inclusion policy passed in St. Louis
sure.
Park. Nobody was there. Nobody goes to school board meetings. It's so boring, right? Nobody wants to run for school board, but all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
They're talking about queer folks. They're talking about Black folks. They're trying to share history. They're trying to encourage empathy in their kids to be able to identify perhaps with the plight of others that are different from them, that have more challenging lives based on their identities and their experiences. And that's a threat. We don't want our kids to have empathy.
I agree with you, and as you're working through it, I feel like it's almost like we don't want our kids to know what we did. And I that's
on the
that's
nose.
how I feel about
on the nose. We could just be frank in regards to it, right? When you think about the first integration of schools in this country, and the folks that were there and yelling and screaming in the face of the Black kids that were going there,
right.
Those are the folks that are involved in these
Yeah.
anti-campaigns now, because Gen X was the first generation that didn't live through segregation, that didn't have the lived experience of segregation. My parents did, right? And so I think you're right in regards to hitting on the fact that we don't want them to know what we did and what we believed in and everything, and still believe it.
Yeah, I think that's the emotional core,
right?
For them,
Correct.
Without speaking for them, I think they all need therapy,
and a lot of them are in positions of power. To be able
true.
to be able to prevent this kind of stuff from happening, and for information and education. Everybody has an iPhone; they can Google this stuff, right? Audible and all those kinds of things with books are available and everything. So it's all. Here's the thing that's funny to me.
Okay.
Posts about book bannings and stuff, and people are like, well, if the book's banned, then why is it available at the stores? Because you can prevent them from being in your school library,
right?
Right. And all those different types of things. So a ban doesn't necessarily mean it's banned everywhere in the country or everywhere in the state. You have the ability to be able to remove it from having access from it in your community. Whereas people don't necessarily have to go out and buy it. They can go to the library and have access to it for free, right? And you preventing a library, your local library, from having it is banning a lot of folks that don't have the resources to be able to buy a book to be able to get this information.
Very true. And I do think the intention behind the local bannings is to build up momentum. So eventually it's not available on the
Correct.
shelf.
Right. And as well, again, multi-prong approach that they're coming about at coming at this about it.
Mhm.
Going after the textbook publishers,
Yep.
right? Because, the publishers aren't necessarily going to print a book just for Texas, right? A history book
Correct.
just for Texas. So
But
Texas has different history books, and the
yeah, I
South
was
has,
gonna say.
and the South does have different history books. But I mean, these are the things that I mean, if they pressure them to make some of these changes, they have to make a financial decision whether it's advantageous and profitable because this is a capitalist society.
Yeah.
Is it fine to just change it for everybody, and then that's what everybody has access to from that perspective. So they're very strategic in regards to how they're going about this.
Well, you are spot on everything that you're pointing out. I would encourage people to dig a little deeper, a little bit more research what's going on. Now, after we go to break, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the mechanisms that are being used. But I don't want to spend this whole first part of the conversation in the muck. Because what I found was when I go back and I watch my episodes, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Jerome, you're saying we need to be more organized, we need to be doing this stuff, but there are people
Yes.
who are supporting you and us, all of us, during this time. And so I would love to take a few minutes to lift up some of those people and organizations if you're able to.
There are so many, which has been amazing and great, right? So, well, the first one I want to make sure that I reference, and this actually, it's a twofold, yes, because this is a story that we'll be talking about later after the break.
Okay.
Best Buy was the first corporation to support my book as a corporate sponsor. So
There
what
you
they did
go.
was they purchased 150 books that got donated to LGBT nonprofits and or schools
Yeah.
or GSAs, right? At the high schools where there are queer kids. And so, they're all about education. They have an aspect of their giving that really focuses on that aspect and element of it. And so I was prided with the fact that my home state of Minnesota and that Best Buy was the one that was like, absolutely, we want to support this. But then there's other companies and organizations around the country that have supported it, like Bristol Myers Squibb, Merck, Southern California Edison, Wyndham Hotels for Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
And it's been amazing to see the corporate support that's come out as it relates to it. But then organizations like, providing me with the platform to be able to share the story of LGBT history with folks.
Sure.
So there's like the LGBT Real Estate Alliance, which is a national organization that focuses on getting rid of discrimination in the housing market as it relates to the LGBTQI plus community. So there's just so many. Unfortunately, there's too many for me to name, but those are the ones that I'll just rattle off for us today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Any like Minnesota nonprofits?
Of course.
Okay.
Right. So I'm on the board for Quorum, which is the LGBT Chamber of Commerce.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to get somebody to come in from Quorum. So
that's easy.
the executive director doesn't want to be on TV.
I'm coming to get you, Rebecca. I was just on the phone with her. So that is a yes, because I was going to ask you about that. It's going to happen.
Okay.
It's going to happen. She wants me to come with her. I'll come, but she can.
Oh, that would be great.
I've learned so much from her. She's so amazing. Really, it's been the support of the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the Quorum, the Twin Cities LGBT Chamber of Commerce, that connected me with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, which connected me with a lot of these corporations that have been supporting the book.
Oh, that's good.
So it's how it grows and builds from that perspective. Again, it starts local.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the important part from that perspective.
Have there been any attempts to ban your book in Minnesota?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's wonderful.
Yes,
That's
not that I'm aware of. Other quick nonprofits, P-Fund.
Oh,
right? So P-Fund is awesome and amazing.
They are going to come onto the show. So
Yay! I love P-Fund. Heart for P-Fund. As well as Reclaim, right? Which provides mental health services to trans and non-binary youth. So they're the fiscal sponsor for the book. So my organization is not a nonprofit. So what we do is, when we have these corporate sponsorships and stuff, Reclaim.
They partner with Reclaim.
Yeah, Reclaim, and they get a portion of the proceeds that go towards the work that they're doing. And that was the first actual board of directors that I was on was Reclaim. So they always have a soft spot for me.
Another shout out for Reclaim. You shouted them out at the end of your episode with us, the very first one.
Do you need somebody from Reclaim to come up on here?
Oh, you're welcome. But that is what opened up the idea of other nonprofits coming up and being able to lift them up on the show. So you've really done excellent work.
Team effort.
Team effort.
I got my homework now. I know who I'm going to need to reach out to.
Okay, we are going to be right back with more from Zaylore Stout about exactly how this book banning stuff is working, and what we can do to stop it. Be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Bottomless Coffee with Jerome, and we are talking with author and attorney Zaylore Stout. So you just put your attorney hat on this time.
One hat off, one hat on.
What laws are these people using to ban these books?
Well, some are laws and some are policies and protocols and procedures. So let's start at the local level.
Okay.
School boards have a lot of power in regards to parental rights and things of that nature. So they're leveraging the power that the school board has in regards to requiring either notice to parents in regard to things or requiring that parents opt in as opposed to having their kids opt out. There are laws that are also being passed now at state levels that are requiring for schools to share with the parents if the kid comes out, right?
Oh, that's dangerous.
It's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous because interestingly enough, especially in, K through 12, a lot of times LGBTQI plus kids, the school is the only place where they have the ability to actually be themselves.
Yeah.
That was one of the sad parts about COVID was a lot of these kids had to go back in the closet because they weren't actually able to leave the home and go to school, right? And so how do you meet at the GSA when you're,
and that's a whole nother thing because you might not be gay, you might not not be queer, you might just be confused and don't know.
Correct, right? And this whole belief that folks that are queer, folks that are trans, that this is a fad or a trend.
Oh my
and
God.
Again, that's the thing that the book shares is that we've always been here, right? Always been here. They've been trans folks since before this country was founded. I have to use that in air quotes.
Yeah.
But then there's also laws that are being passed on a state level, like for example with Florida with the woke, anti-woke bill, and the Don't Say Gay bill, and so as an attorney, I knew that these laws wouldn't fly, right? And so the courts have thrown them out and said that they're unconstitutional.
Oh, good.
However, the problem is how long were they in place?
Yeah.
And then how many kids were impacted during that time frame where they weren't able to see themselves reflected in history?
Yeah.
Right? We're saying that you can't reference anything that makes other people feel uncomfortable. That's ambiguous. There's no way that they're going to be able to enforce that, but the chill is already there.
So let me think about this. I did go to law school, so I'm thinking about this just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The laws that have been challenged that were pretty obviously unconstitutional, but were in place for a long time, there were multiple of those in many different states, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've talked a lot about Florida. In Florida, I thought, was it the Florida Supreme Court, or was it a federal court, or was it a U.S. Supreme Court?
That's addressing these?
Yes.
More often than not, it's federal courts. And so that's...
Well, see, a lot of people don't know.
Correct.
Okay, federal courts only impact like a certain number of states. Okay, so we're at the federal court level saying that Florida's bill won't fly.
Correct.
But some other states who are not under that same federal jurisdiction are not bound by that decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So there's a patchwork of different circuit courts around the country that cobble together a certain number of states. They're all different.
Thank you. I did not do well in civil procedures. That's very helpful. Thank you.
No, but the thing is you're absolutely right. And so what normally happens is that there's a conflict amongst circuits in regards to the interpreting of a given law. Then that's when they can go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter in regard to these issues, right? Okay. And so there haven't been issues. These aren't issues that have made it to the Supreme Court yet. But the important part that I want to make sure that I also reference is the difference between state and federal court. Because if you have state courts, and this is, again, reminds me of, civil rights movement in the South and things of that nature. It was the federal government that was like, we need to integrate. Yeah. And then it was the states that were like, no, right? And so that's when you had the federal guard and then at schools, forcing the integration and aspect of it. That's the same thing with the state courts, because if the states are like, no, we have the ability to be able to make our determinations, but the federal court's like, no, these are protections that everybody should have across the nation. Yeah. And so that's why I think it's important that we have a federal court system that allows for folks to be able to bring those issues there when they know that the state court and the state legislature and or attorney general aren't really interested in regards to protecting rights of minority groups or these different groups.
And there's another nuance here too, because there are these state laws, but then there are also these school board policies. And so is it possible that a school board can still do what they want to do, remove your book from the shelf, even though the federal court has ruled that the state law is unconstitutional?
Right, and so and the conservative movement is smart in regards to their having.
Isn't that a shame?
Think tanks spend a lot of money on think tanks. That's the one thing that the liberals don't necessarily do as much as invest money in regards to addressing these issues and really flushing these types of things out. And so, if you don't have a law on the books on the state level, then how is it that you combat it, right?
Right.
And so what they say is that, a lot of this stuff is local, right? Depending on deciding what books and what rights parents have as it relates to their kids' education is intentionally something that's supposed to be very local.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's been a lot of what they've been able to do is focus on that aspect of it. Parental rights. That's what they want to frame it as. Parental rights. You want parents to be able to have the right to be able to be engaged and involved in regard to their kids' education. It's like, were you not engaged and involved post 2020?
But this is something that's really interesting because it's very similar to that dual identity thing I mentioned earlier. Because so many queer families don't have kids.
Correct.
And so we talk about parental rights. You are excluding so many people. Like you're talking about me and telling me I can't be a part of the conversation.
Right. And here's the thing. It's like if you're talking about parental rights, then what about the rights of the parents that want their kids to have access to this information?
Also true.
And so the issue with, and that's, I think
they don't yell as loud.
The important counterbalance as it relates to these bans is, okay, then fine. If you want to opt out your kid having access to this information, then have them opt out. But you're imposing your beliefs upon everybody else and preventing everybody else from having access to it. So what about the rights of those parents that want to be inclusive, that want their kids to be able to learn about, different folks that live different walks of life than they do?
And that kind of brings me to my next thought is, like, how have those parents reacted and organized? How have the political community, how have they reacted? Like
to the book bannings?
to everything.
That's what I'm trying to clarify the question. There's so much.
Let's start with the book bannings.
Okay.
And we can even maybe frame it against abortion.
Okay.
Right? Like, things happen that people don't like. Most people don't like. Rights were taken away. So with regard to the books were, an act was enacted, books were taken away. Over here, I'm seeing, people in the streets. I'm hearing politicians loudly saying, we are going to bring these rights back. I'm hearing Biden saying that the Supreme Court is going to understand the electoral power of the American woman.
Oh yeah,
which did get some snaps in my house.
All the snaps, all the snaps. I think there's going to be a rude awakening from that perspective.
I believe so as well. And so, how have you seen the issue of this kind of discrimination in books leveraged, or how does it exist in the conversation?
I think it's been really hard, right? And I think the part that it's been really hard on have been educators, right? Because the educators really want to they're the ones that are interacting with these kids on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes the kids bring these issues of really importance to their individual identities to them, because they might be the only adult that they have that they're able to interact with that aren't their parents, right? And people need to be very well aware that queer kids are still getting kicked out of their homes for being queer, and that the bulk of or worse, true, and that the bulk of the homeless youth community in this country are queer kids. And even when I remember referencing that to my parents, they were like, "Really?" And I'm like, "This is a stat that I've known forever." But again, it's like what information is out there, and why is the information not getting out there? So first, I think it's been hard on the educators, because then it's like even educators that want to do the right thing for the kids are unable to do it because they can get fired, right? And okay, so they get fired because that's what the law was on the books then, and so then they leave the education space and field, and then 3 years later the law is found to be unconstitutional. Well, that doesn't help them out, when they've been out of a job or pushed out of their career that they care about in regards to educating kids. So that's been a big issue that I've identified, especially with the laws in places like Florida, where they prevented queer educators from even referencing that they're queer or even referencing it at all, right? And so those are the things that I knew would be unconstitutional, because if you allow for heterosexual folks to talk about their marriage and their wedding and their relationships, but not allow queer folks to, problematic from a constitutional law perspective. But folks are pushing back and have been pushing back. I mean, this reminds me of, the anti-drag bans.
Oh
Right?
my gosh.
Whether it's drag performances or not performing in front of kids.
I mean, you're so right.
Or drag queen story hour, right? I mean, when you look at the theater and the history of the theater, originally it was all men, and it was men dressing up as women.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to go that far back in our history to see drag performances in the military during World War II.
Oh,
their stories, right? So it's like, it's just the arguments are just so disingenuous.
this is taking me to that comment about needing to invest more in think tanks and messaging and what have you, because when I heard about the drag bans, I said, "Are you gonna tell me that white men are gonna let the government tell them what they can and cannot wear?" Like, I don't think so. So I expect them to be in the streets.
And this is an example how organizations like the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, as well as the local chapters, have been involved in regard to that litigation. So Houston spearheaded, spearheaded the lawsuit against the state of Texas, because a lot of those businesses, whether it be a gay bar or whatever, are the ones that are being impacted in regard to these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have our local venues here, Lush, right? That
Yeah.
has a lot of the drag shows there, and there's specific ones that are for kids, right? It's not any and every drag show that's available for kids. There are ones that are specifically kid-oriented.
Sure.
And so parents can bring their kids there, regardless of whether they're queer parents that are bringing their kids, or parents, heterosexual parents that are bringing their queer kids,
Yeah.
or people that just want to see a fun show and have fun.
If I want to see a live adaptation of Mrs. Doubtfire, you tell me you can't do that in Texas.
I love that movie.
I know.
It's one of my mom's favorite movies too, right? And it's like, that's why, again, it's just the disingenuousness aspect of it. But again, the federal courts have been knocking each and every single one of those laws down, and finding them to be unconstitutional in regards to trying to legislate an art form.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
I can get down with that.
Mm-hmm.
Has that led to any special protections coming out of the court, or are we just reinforcing the existing protections that are already there?
So I always take issue when folks talk about special protections and special rights, because
I would like some special rights, but
I know, right? That's not what we're asking for.
yeah.
We're asking for the same rights as everybody else. We shouldn't have to fight to get the same rights as everybody else, but those are the same rights. That's really what it is, right? But again, it comes back to the think tanks and the framing, right? If the opposing side, the conservative side, is saying they're looking for special rights,
Yeah.
right? The people are like, well, I don't want them to have special rights. Why should they have special rights? But when you dig into it and you find out, no, they just want to have the exact same right that you have.
Yeah.
If you're able to talk about your spouse at work and you're in a straight relationship, then gay folks should be able to talk about their spouses at work too, right? And so that's really where it comes down to. So it's actually some of the more fundamental and principal constitutional arguments that are winning the day in regard to these cases. But again, there's a clear difference between how state legislatures and the state court systems are looking at these things as opposed to federal. And federal's like, no, you can't dictate whether people can dress and drag and perform.
Right.
But sadly, there's also been an issue where this has negatively impacted prides.
Oh, yes.
Right, because I'm a DEI advisor for Twin Cities Pride. I'm affiliated with the U.S. Association of Prides, and even presented at Interpride, which is the organization that manages prides internationally, right? And some of these laws have impacted pride as well, because they're like, well, if you have somebody that's in drag, you can get arrested, or the event can get shut down, or that they're preventing some of these prides from being able to get their permits if they refuse to ensure that attendees are going to comply with the law, right? And so in think tanks, those folks know what they're doing.
They do. But what the example that's coming to me is, and I went to a performing arts high school, but in Georgia. And we had this thing called, like, I think it was like powder puff football games.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, is that when the women...
The men dress up as cheerleaders.
Oh,
or I guess boys, really, at that age. And the girls dress up as football players. And they went out and played a game, and we had pom-poms, and we were having a good time. And I'm like, I don't know if they appreciate how much drag is already a part of our society. In the same way that they maybe don't understand, like, how much gay history is already woven into into America, into the American experience. And so it always seems so clumsy.
It is.
Like, I understand the intent, their negative intent. I think actually what they're asking for are special rights most of the time.
Right. I want the right to be able to discriminate.
Yes.
Is really what it is. And that victimhood as it relates to it is really what it is. I want to have the right to be able to discriminate is really what it is.
But if they were with taking the drag example, they would have to say, okay, well, what we want is for men to only be able, men must wear pants, must wear button-down shirts, must wear baseball caps. Women must wear skirts or must wear dresses or what have you. And no one would ever stand for that.
Well,
I wouldn't think.
Well, remember, it wasn't that long ago in our country's history where that was the law of the land, right?
That's true.
Where you could get arrested if you were wearing a certain number of articles of clothing that corresponded with the opposite gender, right? It wasn't that long ago that women weren't able to wear pants, right? That it wasn't legal for women to wear pants.
My God.
See, and again, that's the part that I think is important with history is that, you know, folks that lived through it remember, but folks that didn't live through it never knew. Yeah. Right? They just think that this is how it's always been. Right? The younger folks are like, yeah, gay marriage, that's always been a thing. Right. Oh, black president? Oh, why would that be such a big deal?
What do you mean? Why
would that be a big deal? Yes. Yes. But certain number of articles of clothing, if you're wearing that were corresponding with the opposite sex, you could be arrested. And then when they would arrest you at that time, it wouldn't have been uncommon for them to post your picture and put your name in the newspaper. So then you're outed as being, at the time they would have used the term cross-dressing, right? That you've been outed from that perspective, and then you lost your job, you could lose your home, you know, you're outed to your place of worship, you know, there's all these reverberating impacts in regards to the police engaging in this conduct. And so part of it was also to be able to put fear in the community to not connect. And not advocate for themselves, which is part of Stonewall. They were like, forget it. Y'all going to keep doing this to us? We're going to fight back.
I honestly, that example is not far removed from if you own a bookstore and you have too many queer identifying books or what have you, then you get a fine, or we shut your thing down, or what have you. So it's really scary when I think through how far back they're trying to drag us with these book bans.
We want folks to not be out, not be visible, especially trans and gender nonconforming, non-binary folks. Absolutely. I mean, and then the sad part is, like, it's not just our community that's being impacted by this, but then it's also our allies. Yeah. Right? Because I don't remember the name of the woman, unfortunately, but in California, I want to say maybe in Malibu on the mountains, there was a woman that had a pride flag out of her shop and ended up getting killed because she had a pride flag out in California, right? Places where you would expect everybody's liberal. It's not. There's conservative spaces everywhere across this country. Majority of the counties in this country are conservative. And so those are things that we have to be aware of as it relates to these things. But, you know, people are getting a lot more brazen in regard to the things that they're doing and how they're attacking. They don't want queer folks to be themselves, and they don't want folks to be able to support them being themselves either.
I would just point out the majority of the counties, yes, maybe not the majority of the populace.
No. That's why I use the language specifically. You know, definitely not the
numerical majority, for sure.
Majority, or the big centers of populations of people anywhere.
Well, given the kind of sprawling nature of this anti-us activism, what could people do to get involved? You know, like, I can only invite you to the show so many times. I'd love to have you on the show every week. But
hey, remember, I have a job to make sure I get some more people for you, and I know what my list is. There's lots of ways to be able to be involved. Support the organizations that support you and support the people that you love. So there's national organizations like a Trevor Project and GLAAD and HRC, just depending on the state that you're in. Support your ERGs at work, employee resource groups. You don't have to be gay to go to the LGBT resource group at work and be there and present as an ally, or to go there and to learn about people that are different from you, right? And so those are important things. Go to your school board meetings. It's really important these days because they're showing up in force and yelling and shouting down folks. Run for office, right? Because that's the other thing. If they end up,
that's you.
A lot of folks are. I mean, that's the thing too. Is that what the conservative folks know that the liberals don't really focus on is the fact that it's the folks that run for school board that end up becoming city council members, and the folks that run city council members that become state house representatives or state senate representatives, and then moving on to federal. And so the conservative folks have always known that, and they've always focused on that pipeline, whereas we have not always. And so, get involved and run and be and rally your neighbors and talk to your neighbors about things. And it's really, it kind of reminds me of, once segregation was outlawed in this country, right? Folks having to have those discussions with each other and discussions with their family. About what's right and what's wrong.
I agree with that.
Right? And to bring them on that moral journey of acceptance and inclusion. I was just at a restaurant the other day looking around and I'm like, 30, 40 years ago, black and brown folks wouldn't be in the same restaurant at the same time eating with each other. We take it today for granted as something that's always been there. I know that it hasn't because I'm a historian. I dig in these things.
Right.
So it's just keep getting the word out because, again, that's what they're trying to drag us back to.
Stop taking your rights for granted. Now, I will say, one thing I thought you might mention is buying this book and supporting queer authors.
Yes. So let me reference that then.
Well, we could do that after the break. You still have more time. We'll be right back with more from Zaylore Stout.
You're hilarious.
Welcome back. We are having a wonderful conversation with Zaylore Stout, author and attorney. And Zaylore, you mentioned something about Best Buy at the top of the conversation. You said we were going to get back to it. What happened? It's my favorite question.
I love that question. What happened? So I received a notification that my book was in a Federal Security Exchange Commission report finding, something like that. And I was like, wait a minute, why is my book?
You just get a Google alert or something?
No, well, I cannot, attorney-client privilege, so I cannot disclose how I became aware of this.
Okay.
However, come to find out, there was one of these conservative advocacy groups that was representing a percentage of shareholders in Best Buy. And what they had done was dug through the charitable giving of Best Buy. And they found that there were several LGBTQI plus organizations that were being supported. The Trevor Project, my book, Our Gay History in 50 States, the Human Rights Commission, the Human Rights Campaign, as well as GLAAD, right? And there was this pressure from this organization to get Best Buy to change how they do charitable giving. And ideally to try to get a commitment from them not to support LGBT causes anymore. Or they're going to make a big splash at the shareholders meeting. And found the article was sent to me, so I'm reading through the article, I'm reading through the emails and stuff, and then I was like, Our Gay History in 50 States, and they're like, and then there's the link, and then there's I guess there's the link to the current page where the book isn't there, but then they have the archive link of where my information was there in regards to the book, and my name in the book is all over. I mean, it's like a page on the Best Buy website. Like this is a cause that we've supported. And again, this was one time purchasing 150 books and donating them back in 2019. And so these folks were like, well, we don't support, and let me make sure I get the language right on this, because this is the important part, right? The group was focusing on making sure that they weren't, that Best Buy wasn't supporting organizations that supported mutilating the reproductive organs of children.
We have been talking for 45 minutes, and
Didn't
Not
get to
once.
no, not once, right? And guess what? That's not in the book.
That's not.
And
No.
guess what? The Trevor Project doesn't do that either.
Mm-mm.
Trevor Project's there to try to help kids that are contemplating suicide.
Yes.
Right? That's not what GLAD does. GLAD is about ensuring that there's LGBTQI plus representation in the media. That's not what the HRC does. The HRC is about corporate equality as it relates to LGBTQI plus issues for employees. So it's interesting in reading through all those emails and stuff, especially through the eyes of an attorney, and being like, oh, they got lawyered. They thought they got something that they didn't get.
Correct.
Because they were like, oh, we have protocols that we apply that would ensure that those things don't happen. And they're like, yay, we got what we wanted. And it's like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Just let them be fooled.
But here's the thing. But the problem is that then they go out to the media and say, we got this.
Right.
And that's not accurate. Right. They say we got them to change their giving, They're still giving the Twin Cities pride.
Good.
Right? And so that's the frustrating part for me. And it reminds me of Target, right? Because this is the second now Minnesota-based corporation that's been targeted in this way. And for those that don't recall, perhaps, last summer there was a push against Target from folks that were anti-LGBT. And they were like, we were able to get Target to remove their pride display or push their pride display in the back of their store. But as an employment attorney, I know that there's always more to the story.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I already know that every Target store doesn't have a pride display. There's certain markets where that's the case.
Yeah.
And if there were threats of harming employees at their location, Target has a responsibility to protect their employees.
Yeah, that'd be very different.
So if that means in Oklahoma City that they take the pride display out or they move the pride display to the back of the store to be able to provide that safety and those safeguards for their employees, that's what I would expect for them to do. But then that's not, and again, I'm not sure if that's what happened, right? But that could easily be a justification for them doing what they were doing. They still had pride displays at Targets all over the country.
Yes.
Everything was still available for sale and for purchase online. Yeah. Right? But then they go out and say, yay, we got Target to change.
And Target's like, I'll just wait 5 minutes and then.
Right, but then the problem is that then the LGBT folks are like, they believe what these crazy people are saying. Right. And then they're like, what? Target, you don't support us anymore? And then there's all this thinking, and they're just because they're the first one or the loudest one to get to the media to say something and share misinformation that's not true.
And it puts Target and Best Buy in a lose-lose situation.
Correct. Right? Yeah. But, being local and being involved, you are in connection with people that are these decision makers that are involved in it. It's like, no, none of that's what's reported is not accurate. Yeah. And that's the sad part.
It's frustrating. But one thing that those corporations could do is up their giving.
They could.
If they were so inclined.
So inclined, they could up their giving.
Affirm their commitments to the community.
I agree. They could sponsor the book for a state.
Why not?
Right? 75, 150, 300 books. Tax deductible.
We'll go along.
Their money that goes to Reclaim, right? The local LGBT nonprofit. There's lots of things that people can do to be able to support.
Okay, now I like to give the guests a final message, but we have 60 seconds.
Oh, 60 seconds. All right, good. If you want to purchase the book, get it directly through our website. It's gay50states.com. Because if you do it that way, you can identify an LGBT nonprofit that gets 10% of the book's proceeds. If you look on our website and you find that there's a nonprofit that's not listed that you support, let us know so we can get in contact with them and add them to the list. My focus and goal is to have every state covered with LGBT nonprofits that we can support. I'm always about giving back.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Zaylore, thank you so much. I was convinced it would fall down.
Oh,
every time I know, right? I was like, it's going to smack. Thank you so much for coming on here, giving us some wisdom and some education and helping us keep up with everything that's going on.
So much.
I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me back.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for tuning in. This has been Bottomless Coffee with Jerome. As always, we want to have a special shout out to the Minnesota Department of Health for sponsoring our show this cold, flu, and COVID season. Don't forget to keep yourself healthy, vaccinated, masked up, all those things. And stream all of our episodes at bottomlesscoffeeshow.com. Thanks so much.